We went to Colombia, with great expectations. I mean, it's kind of like adventure. We're going overseas. This is, we were actually in the first group that went overseas. So we were applauded. It was exciting. And so as we went, and our director said, why don't you work at the University of Los Andes, which is a private university? And the response though was not, like people were falling in line to receive Christ. It was one here, a little bit there, a little caution there.
The National University was a hotbed of communism and anti-Americanism.
We were asked, after attempting to go on the National University, we were asked to not go to the National University. It was just too much of a problem being Americans to be there.
The couple of times I went into the student cafeteria, literally got hissed. It was very anti-American.
There were times where I literally would go to bed at night crying.
Both of us.
Just crying out to God, why am I here? Are you ever going to do something? I questioned God many a time about that. And he just would say, I called you to go out and do this. Do it. Be faithful.
When we talked about leaving Colombia, I think we had very mixed feelings. We had come to love the people.
I know we felt when we left, or I felt when we left, it was kind of like, did anything happen?
When we left Colombia.
When we left Colombia. There was that sense of failure. Did anything happen? Did God really send us here for nothing? And it felt like nothing.
Yeah, as we look back now, we can see things that were happening along the way, both in our individual ministries and also on the broader scale.
The first time that we went back to Colombia, this is 20 years later, one of our staff said, somebody is waiting, Guillermo is waiting eagerly to see you. Now, Guillermo had been a student at the University of Los Andes where we had worked, and he was one of the mocking students. He just thought this whole thing about Christianity was ridiculous. And he invited us over for dinner, and we were sitting there, and he says, I just have to say thank you because you were the first one to share God's word with me. So that was one incident.
The big one was in Miami.
In the 90s, when the group that had come back, and they were talking with Jan Beal. Jan Beal.
I know that name.
We know that name. The one who was a lawyer. And he said, your name is on the papers, the official papers for the beginning of Campus Crusade for Christ. And he said, you're our spiritual parents. And that's a whole movement throughout the whole country. So yeah, it's amazing, but it didn't feel like that in the 60s.
And this whole business of measuring by the number of converts, when you look back at the history of missions, there have almost always been people who initially have given their lives and seen very little fruit. Back in the 1800s, Adoniram Judson, these guys spent their lives, 40 years or more, out there and saw a handful of converts, less than one a year. And yet today, the history of missions is indebted to them. The church is indebted to them. Because if it hadn't been for their willingness to break ground and to sacrifice themselves, we wouldn't be where we are today, by a long ways.
So it definitely was a sowing period. a time of being obedient in a tough situation, and still going out every day, or almost, and going on campus and sitting down with people and sharing our faith and making appointments for follow-up and doing what God called us to do without necessarily seeing, at that point, a large response. Never question in the dark what God is showing you in the light.